The Sumerians. Around 4500 BC, people in ancient Mesopotamia started doing something new. They began keeping records. They drew symbols on clay tablets to track grain and livestock. These symbols slowly turned into the world's first writing system called cuneiform. But the Sumerians didn't invent writing to preserve stories or create literature. They invented it because they needed to do accounting. Merchants needed to track what they owned. Temples needed to record offerings. Tax collectors needed lists. Writing was invented for business. But once it existed, everything changed. People could now record laws. They could write down history. They could preserve knowledge across generations. Kings could send messages to distant cities. Scientists could document discoveries. The Sumerians accidentally gave humanity the most powerful tool in history. Without writing, we would have no books, no contracts, no recorded history. Every generation would start from zero. The Sumerians just wanted to count their sheep. Instead, they created civilization as we know it. The ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians loved beer. They drank it every day. Workers building the pyramids were paid partly in beer. Even children drank it because the water was often unsafe. To make beer, the Egyptians needed large amounts of grain. This meant they needed farming. They needed irrigation systems to control the Nile River floods. They needed calendars to know when to plant crops. They needed mathematics to divide land fairly. They needed engineering to build storage facilities. Beer forced the Egyptians to develop advanced civilization. They created one of the first 365-day calendars. They invented early forms of geometry to resurvey fields after floods. They developed medicine because drunk workers kept getting injured. The Egyptians didn't set out to advance science and mathematics. They just wanted beer. But their love for alcohol accidentally pushed them to create the foundations of organized society. Today's calendars, farming techniques, and even some medical practices trace back to people who really wanted a drink. The Phoenicians were traders from modern-day Lebanon. They sailed across the Mediterranean selling goods, but they had a problem. Different regions used different writing systems. Egyptian hieroglyphs were too complex. Cuneiform had hundreds of symbols. Merchants couldn't learn them all. So around 1050 BC, the Phoenicians created something simple. They invented an alphabet with just 22 letters. Each letter represented a sound, not a word or idea. This was revolutionary. Anyone could learn to read and write in weeks instead of years. The system was so efficient that it spread everywhere. The Greeks adopted it and added vowels. The Romans modified it further. Today, most of the world's alphabets descended from the Phoenician system. The Latin alphabet you're reading right now came from them. So did Arabic, Hebrew, and dozens of others. The Phoenicians didn't create the alphabet to spread knowledge or educate people. They created it to make business easier. They wanted faster contracts and simpler record keeping. They accidentally democratized literacy and made information accessible to everyone. The ancient Chinese. Around 200 BC, China had a problem. The emperor wanted to communicate with distant provinces, but messages took months to arrive. Important orders got delayed. The government needed a better system. So they built roads. Lots of roads. They created a network of highways connecting every major city. They built bridges and cleared mountain passes, but roads alone weren't enough. They needed fast messengers. So they created a postal system with relay stations. Fresh horses waited at each station. Messengers could travel hundreds of miles in days. This system was created purely for government communication. But merchants quickly started using the roads. Traders used the postal stations. Ideas and inventions spread rapidly across China. The roads that were built for military and government control accidentally created economic prosperity. They united different regions into a single market. Technologies developed in one area quickly reached others. China became the most advanced civilization on Earth, partly because their emperor wanted faster mail. The Romans loved public baths. Every city had them. Citizens gathered there to relax and socialize. But bathhouses needed massive amounts of water. Rome's local water sources weren't enough, so the Romans built aqueducts. These were enormous stone channels that carried water from distant mountains. Some aqueducts were over 50 miles long. Some had sections built on arches over 100 feet high. The engineering was incredible. The Romans didn't build aqueducts to advance engineering or impress future generations. They built them because they wanted hot baths. But the technology they developed changed everything. The same engineering principles were used to build bridges. They were used for roads. They were used in buildings. Roman concrete and arch construction influenced architecture for the next 2,000 years. Modern water supply systems still use principles the Romans invented. Sewage systems follow their designs. The Romans just wanted to take baths. They accidentally created the engineering foundations of modern infrastructure. The Islamic Golden Age. Around 800 AD, the Islamic world had a translation movement. Scholars in Baghdad were collecting books from everywhere. They translated Greek, Persian, Indian, and Chinese texts into Arabic. But they had a problem. Copying books by hand was slow and expensive. One book could take months to copy. Knowledge couldn't spread fast enough. So they adopted a technology from China called paper making. Paper was cheaper than parchment. It was faster to produce. Suddenly, books became affordable. Libraries grew massive. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad had hundreds of thousands of books. Students could access knowledge that was previously impossible to obtain. This wasn't planned as an educational revolution. They just wanted cheaper books. But affordable paper accidentally triggered an explosion of learning. Mathematics advanced. Astronomy progressed. Medicine improved. Chemistry became a real science. The scientific method was developed, all because paper made knowledge cheap. The Mongols. Genghis Khan built the largest land empire in history. The Mongol Empire stretched from China to Europe, but ruling such a vast territory was nearly impossible. Messages took months to cross the empire. Khan needed faster communication, so the Mongols created the Yam system. This was a network of relay stations across Asia. Riders could change horses every 25 miles. Messages could cross the empire in weeks instead of months. The system was created purely for military control, but it had an unintended effect. The Yam connected east and west like never before. Merchants used the routes. The Silk Road became safer under Mongol protection. Chinese inventions reached Europe. Gunpowder arrived in the West. Printing technology spread. The compass reached European sailors. Paper money was seen by Western merchants. Many historians believe the Mongol Empire accidentally started the Renaissance. European exposure to advanced Eastern technology triggered an explosion of innovation. The Mongols didn't intend to share technology. They just wanted to control their empire. The Dutch. In the 1600s, Dutch merchants had an expensive problem. Trading voyages to Asia cost a fortune. A single ship could cost as much as several houses. Most merchants couldn't afford it alone. So in 1602, they created something new. They formed the Dutch East India Company. Multiple investors pooled their money together. They issued shares. Anyone could buy a piece of the company. This was the world's first publicly traded company. It was also the first stock market. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange opened in 1602. Investors could buy and sell shares daily. The Dutch didn't invent this system to revolutionize economics. They just wanted to afford bigger ships, but they accidentally created modern capitalism. The concept of corporations came from this. The stock market came from this. Investment banking came from this. Today's entire financial system traces back to Dutch merchants who wanted to buy boats. The British, during the Industrial Revolution, British factories had a problem. They needed workers to arrive on time, but most people didn't own clocks. Workers lived by the sun, not by schedule. Factories couldn't operate efficiently when workers showed up randomly. So companies started providing pocket watches. Then they installed public clocks in town squares. Train companies created standardized time zones so schedules would make sense. Before this, every town had its own local time based on the sun's position. London's time was different from Manchester's time. The railway companies forced the entire country to use the same time. This wasn't about making life convenient. It was about making workers punctual and trains run on schedule. But it accidentally created our modern concept of time. Today, the entire world operates on standardized time zones. Schedules, appointments, and deadlines exist because factories needed workers to show up. Our obsession with punctuality and productivity came from steam engines and assembly lines. The Americans. In 1969, the US military had a communication problem. If a nuclear war happened, phone lines would be destroyed. The military needed a communication system that could survive a nuclear attack. So they created ARPANET, a network where messages could take multiple paths to reach their destination. If one path was destroyed, the message would find another route. This was purely a military project. But scientists at universities got access to ARPANET. They started using it to share research. Then they started sending messages to each other. Email was invented, then file sharing, then forums. By the 1990s, civilians could access it. Companies started building websites. The internet was born. The military created it to survive nuclear war. It accidentally became the most transformative technology in human history. Social media, online shopping, streaming, remote work. Everything you do on your phone exists because the Pentagon was worried about Soviet missiles.